3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
From Philadelphia to Los Angeles
And everywhere in between.
filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio.
It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
We are live with another episode, and we're 1-0. Welcome back, Nittany No Huddle Nation. We got 0 people watching the stream right now, so that's electric. But maybe you guys will watch it at a later date. So, real quick, we'll go through West Virginia recap real fast. I know we hit on that on the after game show, and we will talk Bowling Green, right? Bowling Green? No, yeah, Bowling Green. I can't remember all these MAC schools. They all blend together. And then we'll do pick'ems. So I'll turn it over to Devin since we didn't get his thoughts on the West Virginia game for those of you who watched our last stream.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys covered it a lot. I thought Drew Aller looked really, really good after the first quarter. I didn't get to watch the fourth quarter live, but I watched it back the next day, and I thought he looked really good. Nick Singleton had that huge carry. They said it was the fastest run of the week or whatever, like 21 miles per hour. It's freaking insane. I guess he has that speed back. And I thought we just completely dominated on both sides on the offensive and defensive line, which you guys covered kind of ad nauseum. So I don't really feel like I need to say too much about it. But it was good to feel like our offensive and defensive line are what kind of won us that game and completely dominated both sides of the ball. So I don't want to get my hopes too high because I still think we're going 10-2. It doesn't, like, if we would have beat West Virginia by 1 point, I still would have thought we were going 10-2. So it doesn't really matter, but it's better than, I don't know, Bowling Green beating Fordham by 20. So we'll take it.
Yeah, I did not know that was the fastest run of the weekend because he still looks slow, in my opinion. But maybe
Penn State tweeted it out today.
No, of course they did. Sabermetrics, right, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, Devin's right. I think we kind of hit all the big items. I will say when I went back and watched the game again, I gotta, if I'm gonna call out something that I don't think we really spoke to specifically, I feel like the offensive tackles were really, really good. And we heard coming out of camp actually that both Anthony Donko and Nolan Rucci would both play at right tackle, and I think Rucci got in. Rucci, of course, the transfer from Wisconsin, who was originally from Lancaster County. But I think Donko played basically all of the snaps during the competitive portion of the game, and he was really good. And I think at left tackle, you're replacing NFL draft picks at both left and right tackle. And I don't think we missed a beat. I mean, there was a few moments where there was a little bit of pressure on Aller, but I think it was mostly up the middle. And I don't think Aller's scrambles were really instances where he was sort of scrambling or running for his life, and it was more just the pocket shifted or collapsed a little bit and he moved, saw they were playing zone and took off and ran. So if I have to repeat something from the last show, I guess I'd say I'm really impressed with the offensive line, especially for a group where coming in, you're like, hey, we just lost a couple NFL draft picks. Are we sure we can replace that? And so far, so good in my book.
I agree completely. Like Devin said, we kind of hit it ad nauseum last time. So we'll spare folks that recap again. Moving on, we got Bowling Green. Should be a nothing burger, hopefully. I expect us to go out and take care of business. What I do want to see out of that game is I want to see more Bo Perula out there. That's what I want to see. But maybe they're gonna hold off on some of those packages just to keep the element of surprise going. Is my thoughts, but that's my hope, and I really hope we can dominate the edges on the run game. That's what I want to see. I want to see Nick Singleton out in space, and I would love to see us run some draw plays, or not a draw, screen plays. I mean, I don't think we ran any screens against West Virginia. Do either of you guys remember?
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Not even like a wide receiver screen. I don't think.
Yeah, which is
I feel like we did try to run like a tight end screen that one time to Warren, and Aller missed him. It was like pretty early, but maybe I'm thinking of a different game. I don't know.
yeah. I don't remember. I remember him missing Warren on a pass, but I don't remember what the play call was. Which is kind of surprising, if you would have asked me 5 years ago of us running no screens, I would have been shocked considering we ran them every other play, it felt like. So I don't think I saw any.
Don't even talk about the
RPOs.
John Donovan. Don't even talk about the John Donovan era. Bubble screen left, bubble screen right.
A lot of bubble screens.
I think Nittany. I mean, I think if you go back and watch, I'm sure they ran screens, but if you go back and watch the Kansas tape, it seems like there's really an emphasis on getting the ball down the field. And I do think, just as sort of an aside, there was a couple formations that Penn State showed with actually a four receiver bunch into the boundary. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are some screens or some quick formational changes that he employs to get teams into a numbers disadvantage. So we'll probably see it at some point, but I don't know. I think you guys kind of talked about it a little bit with Bowling Green and these types of games. Generally, there's two schools of thought. It's, do we just go super vanilla, just get through the game and move on to the next one? Or do we use it as an opportunity to put stuff on film? Because we know there's not a lot of stakes, right? But we put stuff on film and we maybe we up the bow package a little bit so that we know that Ohio State and USC and those defensive coordinators are watching it, and they now there's just one more thing for them to worry about. I think there's two schools of thought on that, and there's not really a wrong answer. I suspect, most of us probably are more of the variety of like, let's just run our stuff, get the backups in. Let's see some of the true freshmen with the new rules that you can play freshmen up to 4 games. These are the types of games that are actually really, again, you don't want to overlook opponents, and you got to give Bowling Green respect. These guys are Division I football players too, but these can be really important games for developmental players, guys that are kind of, trying to get a backup job maybe, and they're not going to get in. They didn't get in West Virginia, right? So like, good example would be Tyseer Denmark, the freshman wide receiver who everybody was talking about coming out of camp at the receiver position. I think he only got like five snaps maybe. As much as we liked Harrison Wallace coming out of week 1, I'd say there's probably still some room for someone to break out of that receiver room. Is this
Julian Fleming?
Yeah, has anybody seen him? Is he still alive?
He's in Columbus.
He actually played. I think he only played one less snap than Wallace, and he saw the field a lot. I just don't think he's going to be a focal point of the passing game. But anyway, all that to say, receiver. I think both of the true freshman running backs, Franklin has really spoken highly of. Quentin Martin, especially. I think these are the types of games where you see what you got, and maybe with the 4-game thing, you can keep your red shirt until you figure out a way to play these guys, but not burn their red shirt. Or maybe some of these guys come in and you see like, hey, they look like one thing in practice, but now in game mode, these guys have it and they're going to help us. And people always forget, just as an example, Saquon Barkley wasn't a day 1 starter. Really, it was a game against, I think it was Buffalo, where he came in, took the job and just never looked back. But he wasn't right out of the gate in day 1. He didn't have the job. And so those types of things can happen. I'm not suggesting we have like a Saquon Barkley and somewhere buried in the depth chart who's going to show himself. But these games are interesting for that reason, because I think you get a little deeper into the depth chart to see what you have.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully we take care of business early and we can see that. I don't want to be stressed out this weekend. So do you guys want to do score predictions next? I don't know if you guys have thought that far ahead, but I'll go first. I think we do take care of business just based off of what I saw out of us last week. I'm predicting 42-10.
I'll go next. I'm kind of close to you, actually. I was thinking something like 44-16. I do think with the bye actually next week, I think Franklin looks at this as an opportunity to really get guys. It's hard to even say like get guys healthy. We only played 1 game, but just to make sure we've got an extra bye week coming up. We don't need to play guys longer than we need to. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Bowling Green gets a little bit more garbage points than you might expect. So I'm going to go 44-16.
Yeah, and just to throw a couple names out there for our fans, some people to look out for Bowling Green, since we didn't really mention anybody, because I think we're all in agreement that this should be pretty much a play everybody type of game. But Bowling Green does have a stud running back, Terrion Stewart. I mean, he played 9 games last year and rushed for almost 800 yards. He put up 161 in their first game against Fordham, so he's just somebody to keep an eye out for. And talking about our offensive line, Zach, you even mentioned that some of the pressure that West Virginia did have came up through the middle. They have a really stud nose tackle, Anthony Hawkins, who had 2.5 sacks last week. So it'll be interesting to see. Now, obviously, Fordham is pretty bad. I get that. And I don't think Bowling Green is going to cause any problems. But if they get any pressure out of this kid in the middle, that would be a little bit of a concern for me moving forward. It's also interesting that their quarterback is Connor Bazalek. That name sounds familiar for Penn State fans. He was at Indiana in 2022 and actually missed the Penn State game when Penn State won by like 35 in that game. So all that to say, I think this is a complete blowout. But like Zach said, it would not surprise me at all if Bowling Green scores a couple touchdowns late, because we're like, if Drew Aller plays past halftime, that's probably a problem, and that's probably not a good thing. So I'm going to say the Delaware score last year was 63-7.
Something like that.
I'm gonna say 49. No, 52. We get a field goal somewhere. 52-17. 52-17. I hope it's more like 49-0, but I think they'll be able to score in the fourth quarter as we're playing a lot of guys. So I'll go 52-17.
I think we miss a field goal, so
wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That's actually maybe, again, assuming this game is the blowout that we think it is, that's another thing maybe to watch for is, does Franklin, does he try to get, not that you don't want to get first downs and score touchdowns, but do we actually look for kicking opportunities to maybe run multiple guys out there and try to use a game like this where maybe you get up early and you get into some situations where you might, like 4th and 1, you might be inclined in a different game to go for it. Do you try to test your field goal kickers more and figure out, do we have a kicker? And if so, who is it? And, if you recall, last year started out very similarly for Sander Sahadak. He missed 2 field goals in the West Virginia game. And then they went to, you might have to help me, Falcons, Alex Falcons. He got a shot and he took the job and he ran with it. And so, that's something to watch for, because it was a little disconcerting again to kind of see that play out in the first West Virginia game. That field goal that Sahadak missed was, I think, 47 or something like that. So it wasn't like a gimme, but it is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I think that's enough about Bowling Green. Moving on, let's hit the pick'ems for this week. So, Zach, do you have the list up, or do you want me to pull it up quick?
I'm pulling it up momentarily.
All right,
I got it.
All right, so we got Duke at Northwestern. minus 2.5 for Northwestern, correct?
Northwestern is the home team. They are not playing at Ryan Field. For those of you that don't know, they're playing at a little makeshift high school looking field, which is actually really cool. It's right along the lakefront. It's actually really cool. It looks like a high school stadium, but it does look really cool. Didn't mean to interrupt, Jordan, but
no, you're good.
If you haven't seen it, I would at least check it out, because it's literally like they're playing right on the lakefront.
Yeah, that'll be fun in November.
Oh, yeah.
So we got I got Duke. Zach, you have Duke, and Coach Devin going with the Big Ten Northwestern.
Yeah, no reason.
Yeah,
I think it's an ugly game. I think it's going to be relatively low scoring and ugly and not great offensive play. Northwestern won last week over Miami Hydroxide, Miami, Ohio. And I think it was like 13-3, 13-6. So the defense, Northwestern was really the surprise team of the Big Ten, if you ask me, last year. But I like Manny Diaz. Long-term, I like Duke picking up Malik Murphy, the backup quarterback from Texas. I think he can be good. So I think maybe just his athleticism is enough to put them over the top against the Northwestern team that I don't think has really much offense at all.
Did Duke play last week? I didn't see.
They did. They beat somebody so inconsequential that I don't remember who it was.
Chattanooga.
Even less consequential than Chattanooga.
All right, moving on. Probably the game of the week, right? I would assume. Number 2, Texas, 7.5-point favorites at number 10, Michigan. I will say Michigan looked pretty bad against Fresno State last week. Definitely some issues going on there. Their defense looks good. Zach, maybe you know his name. Who's their really good? I think he's a corner, right?
So they got Will Johnson, the All-American corner, is back from last year. I think he was a true freshman last year. He's really good. He had a pick six late in the game.
Yeah, I saw that
on a screen pass.
To your point, the score was a little deceiving because you just check the box score like 30-10. They probably controlled that game and just sort of classic Michigan, like they didn't blow them out, but just kind of strangled them. It really wasn't that. It was a 6-point game in the fourth quarter. But Michigan's interesting. They still have like Will Johnson's probably as good as any corner in the country. I think they have the best defensive tackle. As much as I love Penn State's defensive tackle rotation, they've got two guys that, if you remember the Penn State game last year, were just utterly dominant, and they're both back. Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are just like, they're of that absurd like 310-pound guys that can run and chase. There's a play from last year where Grant chased Katron Allen down in the open field. Guys like 330 pounds. It's nuts. So they're still elite at some positions. I think they got a real quarterback problem on their hands, though. It kind of reminds me, the clips I saw of that game reminds me of like the Jake Rudock, Wilton Spate, John O'Kern era of like the early Harbaugh era, where they were pretty immediately good on the line of scrimmage and really good defensively, and they just didn't have it at quarterback. And I think as much as we like to rag on last year that J.J. McCarthy didn't do a whole lot, with the passage of time, I think we'll realize how much they upgraded at quarterback with him relative to some of those earlier guys I just mentioned. So the question for me is, are they back to where they were? Is there that big of a drop-off? Because Alex Orji all offseason was the guy who was supposed to take the job, and he was going to be this dual threat, and then he barely played. So Davis Warren, it appears to be his job, and they didn't look that great offensively. Yeah. So I'm going Texas.
I'm going horns down. I got Michigan at home. I know they're not favored, but for some reason my gut is just telling me that Texas is also overhyped at number 2. So that's what I'm going to say.
I have Texas. I think Texas has a chance to do something special this year. I think they have all the pieces they need. And obviously you have a great quarterback in Quinn Ewers kind of leading the charge. But they've got some really good defensive players. And joining the SEC obviously is tough. They're going to play juggernauts all the time. But I think that helps them in the long run because they're going to have to fix some problems that they've had in the Big 12 in years past. So I got Texas, but I actually have them close, even though I agree. I thought Michigan looked pretty lousy last weekend when I rewatched that game. But I have Texas close.
I think Quinn Ewers is going to get injured this weekend.
Well, then Arch Manning is still pretty good. So
very, very oddly specific prediction. But, I mean, I think, like I said, I was just talking about Michigan's defense. I don't think Texas is going to go in there and run away with it. I mean, I think barring Michigan's offense making a lot of like boneheaded mistakes, they really just need to get some first downs, punt the ball, and rely on their defense because I think they can keep them in the game. Texas, much has been made about Texas's injuries at the running back position, but they still have a third-year starting quarterback in his third year in the system. They've got a bunch of 3-year starters at the offensive line. I mean, I think Texas is going to be really good this year. I know everyone's going to Devin's point, Texas going into the SEC, they're going to get beat up by the SEC. I think Texas is going to be really good. I do.
I mean, they took care of Alabama last year on the road. So just saying.
And they didn't just beat them. What I saw out of Texas last year was them looking like an SEC team. It's like they kind of finally shedded their Big 12 skin and they metamorphosed into an actual like team built around the line of scrimmage. And it took them like a decade to figure that out, but they just look different.
Hashtag built different. All right, moving on. Number 23, Georgia Tech, -3 at the Cuse, which they have Kyle Honda McCord at quarterback. So I'm going with Syracuse. I think everyone's riding Georgia Tech hard because they beat Florida State. But I don't know. I just feel like playing in the Carrier Dome, I'm taking Syracuse.
Yeah, Jordan and I were talking about this before we came on, and I think now, do I have Georgia Tech in my top 25? Yeah, because they beat a top 10 team. But I think Florida State is just that bad. So for them to be this hyped after starting the year 2-0, first time in the top 25 in like 10 or 11 years. I forget what it was. They're going to go to Syracuse and they're going to lose. I think so.
Yeah, I just think it's a good spot to try to get a point on you guys. I think it's gonna be a close game. I don't think Georgia Tech is world beaters or anything. I do think Syracuse, just as an aside, if you look at their schedule, they probably have like the easiest power conference schedule of any team in one of the major conferences, if you can call the ACC that, I guess. But they basically avoid like everybody, and then some of the tougher games they have in their league they have at home. So there's no world that exists where like if Syracuse can win this game, all of a sudden they're like 6-1 or something later in the season. It just is crazy as an aside. But I like Georgia Tech's quarterback. When I watched the Florida State game, I thought he was really the difference in that game. Florida State didn't have the guy at quarterback, and Georgia Tech did. So I'm going Georgia Tech, but I think it's basically a toss-up game.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on. We got Iowa State at number 21, Iowa -3. I'll tell you, Iowa looked pretty good last week. They started off a little slow, typical fashion. I think they went fumble, punt to start. So that's how I knew football was back. But, I mean, they put up, 48 last week? I can't even remember.
I think it was 40-0, I think.
Yeah, 40. I can't even remember the last time Iowa scored 40 points. Maybe in a season. But they look a lot better offensively than years past. So I think we all took – do we all take Iowa? Devin, did you take Iowa? Yeah. Iowa across the board.
I'm not nearly as high on them as you are coming out of the game. They played an FCS Illinois State team and looked kind of bad in the first half. So I just think Kirk Ferentz knows how to win this game. There's been a lot of years. We've been doing this now for 3 or 4 years. I always pick Iowa State in this game, and I like Matt Campbell. I think Iowa State actually is probably at least a middle of the pack team in the Big 12 this year and might have something to say in the Big 12 race, but they just like Kirk Ferentz just wins this game every year. I looked it up earlier today. They've won 8 of the last 9 in this matchup. And Iowa State's actually had some good teams during that time frame. There's just something. Iowa just wins this game, and it's at home. And so I basically view it as a toss-up game, and Iowa's at home, so that's worth a couple points. Yeah.
That's all I'll say about that. All right. South Carolina at Kentucky -8.5. I think we all 3 took Kentucky. I just went with the favorite there because I know absolutely nothing about either team. So
all I know is South Carolina struggled with Old Dominion, which is probably not a good thing. So even though I don't know anything about them, I saw that score and went Kentucky.
Yeah, I got Kentucky. I think Kentucky is one of the SEC teams that's kind of really flying under the radar. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to be great or anything, but they're just like everybody's talking about the bad teams like Florida, and everybody's talking about how deep the top of the league is. And then you've got Kentucky just kind of hanging out there in the middle. And quietly, I think you got to give Mark Stoops a lot of credit. They've been a very solid, consistent program over the last 6 to 8 years. Now, the big question for them was that because they were in the SEC East at a time when Florida was down and Tennessee until 2 years ago was really down. And so they just kind of filled the vacuum behind Georgia. We'll see. Now, all of a sudden, with no divisions in the SEC, you're going to start seeing LSU and Bama and Texas and Oklahoma and Texas A&M, and so things could change, and they may not be as sustainable going forward. But in this game, I like Kentucky. I think they're at home. I think, as Devin said, South Carolina really struggled last week, so I'm going Kentucky.
All right. Next game. This one should be pretty interesting. I don't have the spread for this one, Zach, so you have to remind me. Number 19, Kansas at Illinois.
This one is Kansas -4.5. That line has been going down all week, actually. I think it was up at 6 or 7.
A lot of money on Illinois. That's what that's telling me. With that being said, I have Illinois winning this game at home. So
that's why the line came down.
Yeah, our
Jordan backed the Brinks truck up.
Yeah.
I thought about Illinois. I really did. I like Brett Bielema. Kansas has some real players. I mean, I know we're a little bit more knowledgeable about Kansas right now. Oddly, Kansas football, who would have imagined, just because obviously our coordinator is from Kansas last year. But they obviously don't recruit at a high level. And I think Kotelnicki is a really good offensive coordinator. He did a really good job. But they have a really good quarterback. They have a really good running back in Devin Neal. They have capable pass catchers. Luke Grimm is a good wide receiver. I just think they have some pieces that Illinois offensively Illinois doesn't have. So unless the Illinois defense really shows up and they make it a low-scoring Big Ten West type game, I just think they can't keep pace.
Yeah, maybe there'll be some inclement weather this weekend out there. Devin, you have Kansas as well. Any
I have Kansas. I mean, just kind of what Zach said. I don't know a ton about what Illinois has back. I haven't done a lot of research on them yet, but I like what Kansas has, and I like what they've done the last few years and what they're kind of building and the kind of guys they're getting. So I think they come in and take care of business.
Zach, did Illinois lose their really good DN from last year? I'm blanking on his name.
So Johnny Newton, Jarzon Newton, or whatever his name was. Yeah, he went to the NFL. I think he was picked maybe – I don't know if it was the first round, but maybe second round. He definitely – I mean, I remember after the Illinois game, I was talking a lot about him, how he dominated Penn State's interior. And that was the one area that Illinois, just from like a schematic standpoint, their defensive front last year could match up with Penn State. Basically nowhere else on the field did that happen, but the defensive front was really good. But he's gone.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, number 14, Tennessee, -10 at NC State. I think we all three took Tennessee. I know Devin's a big NC State hater, so I knew that one was coming down the pipeline. I just think Tennessee, even on the road, I think they take care of business. They have their aim set on a SEC title and a playoff berth, and I think they take care of business this weekend. So,
a couple things. I made a mistake. The game is not actually at NC State. I think it's in like Charlotte or
it's in Raleigh.
It's not. It's a neutral site game. NC State did not look good last week. They played, I think it was Western Carolina, and that was a game in the fourth quarter, an FCS team. And Tennessee played UT Chattanooga, which is nothing to write home about, but they looked really good. I'm high on Tennessee. I think the quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, I don't know how to say his last name. I think he's going to be really good. I think Tennessee's going to be really good offensively. I think they're one of the teams that are kind of a little bit under the radar in the SEC. We talk about the top tier, Texas, Georgia, Bama, probably Ole Miss. And then you've got like Tennessee, Oklahoma, LSU's kind of already taken a step back, but they're kind of sliding under the radar, but I think they have a chance to be really good. And I just think NC State, I think this is your classic SEC, ACC game where you've got two teams that are kind of in like the second tier of their league that want to compete for a league title. And one of them is going to show that they're the real deal and one of them's not. And so I'm going Tennessee. I am curious to hear why Devin has an NC State bias. It's like a weird team to have hatred for.
I actually don't think I have an NC State bias like at all.
I thought there was some story there that I didn't know.
I feel like last year I picked NC State in like every week for the first like 6 weeks of Pick'em, and then they like just sucked and they kind of screwed me over. So I actually just picked Tennessee. I think Tennessee is super overrated to kind of be the opposite of you there, Zach. I think they're super overrated. I think they are just a middle of the pack team that is boosted because they're in the SEC. But I think NC State's bad because I think the ACC is bad. So Tennessee wins, but I don't. It's not impressive.
Do they cover though?
Yeah, they cover. It's 10-point spread. I don't think NC State's any good.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of teams that people don't think are any good, we got Colorado on the road at Nebraska,
which should actually be a good game.
I'm actually excited for that game.
Yeah.
I'm taking Colorado just because I want to try and steal some points from you, but I honestly don't think this game's going to be very close, to be honest.
This is the NBC Saturday night game, right?
Yeah.
I'll let Zach talk all about Nebraska, though.
I was super impressed with Nebraska, to be honest, last week.
So the sneaky thing is Nebraska was actually good last year. They had a bad record. They lost, I want to say 6 or 7 games by like 10 points or less, and they lost 4 games by a field goal or less. And in those 4 games that they lost by a field goal or less, they had a combined 17 turnovers. And the quarterback, Jeff Sims, who's gone, had like 14 of them or something. So Nebraska was a to go back to Drew Aller, all of our discussion about how bad he was. Well, we never turned the ball over. If Drew Aller was the quarterback in Nebraska last year, they're probably 8-4, maybe 9-3. If they just don't turn the ball over, that's how good their defense was. Now, again, they benefited a little bit from playing in the Big Ten West, but like they were sneakily a good team last year that was just shooting itself in the foot week in, week out. And so I think if you watch that Colorado North Dakota State game, North Dakota State didn't, and I know they're an FCS powerhouse, so it's not as simple as saying like the Oregon Idaho game where it's like, what are you doing Oregon with Idaho? Like that was crazy. But North Dakota State came in and they wanted to run the ball, and they had a lot of success running the ball. And defensively, Colorado just kind of like big played them to death. But I don't know. I think Nebraska can basically come in and do exactly what Colorado or what North Dakota State tried and had some success in doing. But I think Nebraska can do it basically the whole game. So as long as they don't even have to bottle up Shedeur Sanders or Travis Hunter, I think they just got to contain them a little bit, make the running game beat you, and then just run the ball on Colorado, because I think defensively they haven't changed. I think it's Dion, and it's just all talk. Nothing. If you watch that North Dakota State game, nothing has changed. They're just doing the same stuff. The offensive line play is not good. They don't run the ball. So one of the things that I hate about Colorado is you hear how horrible the offensive line play is, and these guys get thrown under the bus. Meanwhile, they want to throw the ball 50 times every game so that he can pad his kids' stats. Well, when the other team knows you're going to throw every play, of course they're going to be able to get pressure, right? You gotta at least try to run the ball. So you can probably tell from this rant, I'm all in on Nebraska. I want to see Nebraska smack them, and I think Colorado can keep it close because I think they have the two best players on the field. I'm not nearly as high on Shedeur Sanders as some people are, but he's good. I mean, if you watch that North Dakota State game, basically him and Hunter just like willed that team to a victory. So I think they can hang around. They're going to make some big plays. But if Nebraska just runs the ball and plays safe, reliable defense and try to take away the big plays, I think they've got a really good shot to win this game. And then, not to look ahead too much, but there's a real possibility that Nebraska, if they can win this game, is staring at either 6 or 7-0 when they go to Ohio State in like mid to late October, which is really cool. And just as an aside, and I know Jordan, you want to probably wrap this up, but how cool is it right now that we're talking about in 2024, Miami, Nebraska, Notre Dame, Penn State, all having early season success or being theoretically teams that are going to be in the mix at the end. Like it's just USC, and let me go back to USC too. So you got a lot of teams that have just been former giants of the sport that have kind of been left behind for a while that appear to be coming back. Texas, that appear to be coming back to the
Michigan.
I mean, they won a natty last year, so I don't know if we can really lump them into.
But I'm saying for recent success,
Yeah. I just teams like I think Miami and Nebraska are probably the best example. I mean, because let's face it, Notre Dame's been pretty good for the last decade. I would put them in the same category as Penn State, where they just haven't been able to get over the hump. But if let's say you're a 25-year-old and you love college football right now, right? You don't know a world. You've never known a world that exists where Nebraska was competing for national titles. And our age, I can kind of only barely remember the late 90s when Nebraska was a power. I remember Miami a lot more vividly, but like if you weren't alive for that, you don't understand. Like you don't remember when the U was the U. Like it's easy for people to hear about that and just like, oh yeah, like Navy and Army used to be good too. But like, do you remember Miami when they were Miami? Like how crazy that was? And USC, like the Pete Carroll USC era, that maybe it's just nostalgia, but like that was the peak for me. That was like the peak era of college football.
And Mac Brown.
The early 2000s, Texas was elite. USC was just absolutely steamrolling people. Miami was just at the very end of their sort of 2-decade reign of dominance. Nebraska was starting to kind of peter out a little bit, but Texas. I mean, Texas was one of the top teams in the country. So yeah, I'm excited. As you can tell, I'm excited. I think this is going to be. I'm not a huge fan of the 12-team playoff, to be totally honest, and I think I've expressed that on here. But I think at least in this first year, because nobody knows how it's going to shake out, there's like so much unbridled joy and excitement over it, and that might change over the years as we see how it plays out. But like, there's so many programs that can realistically sit here and think, man, we've got a real shot. Like we're talking about Nebraska. I'm talking about Nebraska being like 7-0 or something, and what that might mean for them playing games in November that have playoff implications. Like it's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps up our pick'ems. I won't be able to do the post-game show Saturday, guys. So hopefully you guys can figure it out or don't. We can do it Sunday, whatever works. So we'll be back after the Bowling Green game. So thanks everyone for watching. That's all I got.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast.
Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.